All right, guys, we're going to start right now. Welcome back here on YouTube to Xeon Talks. So, this is the subject right here, and I'm showing off these two videos. We're only going to look at the first one, it's 14 minutes long. I want to say that science has always pointed to God. There is pseudoscience, and then there is science. I argue and debate with atheists all the time, and I use science. I don't ever touch religion when I'm debating an atheist. They do not even understand their own fossil records and the rock layer, how it is circle reasoning. It's circle talk, it's circle reasoning. If you just study, if you just do nothing but study how the fossil records are established with the layer of rocks, if you just study that, it is completely illogical and it's circle reasoning. It's false. So they find a fossil and they say, oh, well, this is a fossil and we have it in the fossil records as being at this time and this date so many millions of years ago, da 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 da. And then what they do is they say, therefore, the rocks in that area must be that old. But then when you look at the fossil records of the rock layer, it's the same thing. Oh, well, you found rocks in this area. Did you find fossils? Oh, you did. So therefore, it must be so many millions of years old. They have done all kinds of different carbon dating. There is different types of carbon dating, and they all fail. And a lot of people don't know this. There have been animals that have been carbon dated to be millions of years old when they're less than 30 years old. This has happened with multiple volcanic snails that have been tested. This has been done with snails that were alive. This has been done with sea animals that are alive. You can't sit there and argue that something is 70 million years old when you have an established time and date of that thing being born in the last 10 years. Carbon dating always messes up. So we're going to jump into this. For those interested in this, these are the names of the thing, but Stephen Meyer is the main guy speaking. He's overqualified to argue with everybody. He does believe in a God. And he's going to explain to you why evolution has been falling apart. The Darwin side of evolution has been destroyed years ago. Anybody who even pushes Darwinism does not know what the hell they're talking about. If you run across an atheist that supports Darwin evolution, they do not know what they're talking about. They don't know. Darwinism has been out for quite a while. So let's jump over here. We're going to watch this.
Who's coming in the driveway?
Let's get over all the ads.
I don't know, but
I mean, you've got an amazing pedigree to discuss all this. You've got a PhD in the philosophy of science from Cambridge. You're a former geophysicist. You now direct the Discovery Institute Center for Science and Culture in Seattle. You've had New York Times bestsellers, Signature and Marcel, Darwin's Doubt, Return of the God Hypothesis. And you've been on all the biggest podcasts in the world, Joe Rogan, Ben Shapiro. And now, I'm glad to say, Uncensored. This all blew up last week because Tucker Carlson went on Joe Rogan. And I don't know if you saw this, but he said this about this very issue. Let's take a look.
if evolution is real, and if there is this constant, I don't know, but it's visible. Like you can measure it in certain animals.
This is false. This has never been proven. The problem that they are having with Darwin evolution is that the Darwin evolutionists have now stated that we don't have records of animals slowly mutating into a new animal. And according to Darwinism, it would happen over thousands of years or millions of years or hundreds of millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years. There is no such thing. In other words, you'd have, if you're trying to say that a lizard turns into a chicken, you should find all kinds of records in the fossils of a lizard that starts looking more like a chicken in small ways, and the fossil record should be littered with them, and we don't have one. So if you're saying a lizard turns into a chicken, you should eventually start seeing a lizard with smaller arms and standing up on its hind legs over time with hundreds of what we would assume are different species. And you don't have that. And then you should start seeing a slightly mutated different species where you could say, oh, well, this is this. You don't have that. You don't even have it with monkeys and apes. Even if you say Bigfoot is the missing link, that's a massive jump from Bigfoot to a human being. There are no records of this. It doesn't exist. It never has.
You can measure adaptation.
Yeah.
But there's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Now, see, Joe Rogan does not understand because he doesn't follow Darwinism. Darwinism, evolution has been tossed out for years. And a lot of people online still push it and they don't know what they're talking about. It's outdated. And you're going to see that here in a minute.
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil.
One of the problems with single cell organisms is that when we find them and we look at them, they are super, super complex. They're more complex. The smaller that they are more complex than scientists ever assumed. It's like looking at a computer. It's literally like looking at a computer. There's no such thing as a simple single-celled organism. They used to call it a simple single-celled organism, and then they cut out of that because Darwinism realized, we can't find anything because all the single-cell organisms that we can find are extremely complex. 20 years ago, they would constantly say single, simple-celled organism, and now today they just say a single-celled organism.
A record of that, and there's not.
Your response?
Well, I don't know what Tucker knows about all this, but
probably not as qualified as you. But he likes to.
Maybe we start with
ask
something
around.
that happened here in London a few years ago, 2016. A major conference convened by the Royal Society, arguably the world's most august and prestigious scientific body, was convened by a group of evolutionary biologists who are dissatisfied with the standard neo-Darwinian theory of evolution. And many of the conveners are calling for a new theory because...
So you are being told by a top scientist in the world that they had a conference of all the biological evolutionist scientists in the world admitting that they are not happy with Darwinism because it's been proven wrong, it's got holes in it, and so they're trying to figure out what do we do. Now, there's other things that they were not considering that he's going to get on, such as the Goldilocks zone. There are forces at work that if you don't know what the Goldilocks zone is, it is the idea that a planet has to be within a certain degree of gravity, of heat, with some water on the planet. It has to be able to sustain certain temperatures within a temperature range, because if any of those things are off, even by small degrees, life cannot exist. So it would mean that the only time that you find life is in the Goldilocks zones. And very, very few planets are that.
The primary mechanism of biological change articulated by Darwin and his subsequent followers, now called the neo-Darwinists, the idea of natural selection acting on random mutations and variations, is now understood to lack the creative power to generate major changes in the history of life.
And is the crux of this debate, is it, as Tucker was getting at there, is it that if you actually start from where Darwin's theory begins, the creation of the human being was so complicated, the body, the way we exist is so complicated, it doesn't make any rational sense.
There's two issues, really. There's how do you get to the first life from the simpler non-living chemicals? That's sometimes called chemical evolutionary theory, and that's a complete mess. It's in a state of...
Notice he said it's a mess. It is absolutely a mess. So chemical evolution literally states that we were rocks before we were a single-celled organism. I tell atheists all the time when I'm debating, I say, you believe that your great ancestors were rocks. I can't tell you how many atheists I have debated. It's been in the thousands that laugh at that and they say, atheism doesn't believe that. Yes, it does. Chemical evolution literally states that before you go to the single cell organism, prior to that, you were rocks. You were minerals. You were rocks. Period. And the fact that they don't know this, and I lead with it, and then because I expose them, if they don't know what chemical evolution is and how it plays in to Darwinism, the Big Bang, all those things, I've already won. Because now I show that I have far more knowledge than these atheists. The majority of atheists online do not know anything about science, period. They don't. They don't.
Pass. And almost everyone, even your recent guest, Richard Dawkins, acknowledges we have no chemical evolutionary theory that accounts for the origin of the first life. And many people don't know that Darwin didn't attempt to explain the origin of the first life. Rather, he presumed one or very few simple organisms, which we now know were not simple. And then,
so he's literally bringing up that Darwinism did not try to explain everything. He just basically says, well, there's all these species on this island, and they look a little different from the other species on the island, so they must have came from each other. That's what Darwinism states. It doesn't take a genius. A child can figure this out. If something were to evolve, you need an asexual reproduction with that thing, or you need a male and a female of that thing. The chances of evolution happening and then say something grows and it becomes it has to be asexual at first, which means it can, we're using the actual scientific term of asexual, not the LGBT made up idea of asexual that doesn't exist. Asexual means that you can get another being of your species pregnant, but you can also impregnate yourself. There are slugs and snails that are asexual. They do not need a mate. They can literally impregnate themselves, and they're basically cloning themselves to have babies. At some point, if you believe in evolution, you have to claim that these asexual beings, at some point, some of them choose to stop being asexual somehow. It's a miracle, and they become male and female. At that point, you have to admit that in that theory that, okay, say one of them is born as a baby and it's female. Okay, so now we have the first female, and then all the other species is asexual. Who does that female mate with? She mates with nobody. Because now you need a male for her to mate with to prolong that species. You can't do that because in evolution, even if something lays 2,000 eggs and only one mutation happens, so only one of those thousands of eggs somehow goes from an asexual species to a male-female species, it will die out immediately. Immediately. You don't have that. Even if you did have male and female within thousands of eggs of something, I don't know, I'm just bringing up something. All it needs to happen is another creature squish it or eat it, and now it doesn't have a mate. It doesn't prolong. It doesn't take a child's understanding IQ to realize that this can never happen. It can never happen. Like this is the age-old question: what came first, the chicken or the egg? Does the baby come first or does the adult come first? If the egg came first, how does the chick survive? It doesn't. You have to have the adult first, period. Not only do you have to have an adult, you have to have a mate with the adult because you don't get the egg.
Proposed a mechanism by which you could generate all the new forms of life we see on the planet today. But even that now is being challenged because the main mechanism of evolutionary change does a nice job of explaining small-scale variation, what Tucker was referring to.
Okay, small-scale variation is just a way to say adaptation or small-scale mutation. Those are not evolution.
I think is adaptation. This would be examples
he just
like
said adaptation.
Finches, where the beaks get a little bigger, a little smaller in response to varying weather patterns. But it does a very poor job of explaining the major innovations in the history of life, such as the origin of birds or mammals or animals in the first place. And there in the fossil record, we do see very abrupt, many instances of very abrupt appearance without the transitional intermediates that you'd expect on the basis of the Darwinian picture of the tree of life.
So Is your belief that the Darwin theory actually fails then?
I think it does fail. I think it captures an element of the truth. The small-scale microevolutionary variation is certainly a real process, and no one disputes that. Natural selection is a real process, but what's at issue now is the degree to which it has genuine creative power. And I think at this 2016 conference, the opening talk was given by a prominent Austrian evolutionary biologist, not an American talk show host, and he enumerated 5 major explanatory deficits of neo-Darwinism, many of them surrounding this problem of the mechanism.
So he's telling you that these major scientists are pointing out that Darwinism has a serious problem and many flaws.
Lacks the generative or creative power necessary to account for the major innovations in the history of life.
Well, your best-selling book, new book, Return of the God Hypothesis, you argue there are 3 big scientific discoveries that point to the existence of God. I want to go through these. One, the Big Bang Theory. So why would that lend support to a theory of a God? Or
well,
God?
Right. Maybe just a little framing before I dive into the evidence. Professor Dawkins at Oxford has said that the universe has precisely the properties that we should expect if at bottom there is no purpose, no design, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference.
Okay, so if you believe that everything's just random and whatnot, you got a problem, because we can show where there's laws in physics that are absolute. Okay, and then there are things that should be happening that don't happen. So when you put it in a computer and you program a simulation, you get something like, I don't know, the Earth being destroyed by asteroids every 30 years, but it doesn't happen. I wonder why. You get things like solar flares, destroying the Earth. It doesn't happen, though. I wonder why. You get problems where you get into the Goldilocks zone of the physics, and you find planets that can't ever support life, ever. Because there's no atmosphere, they're not in the Goldilocks zone, the gravity's too high or too low, all kinds of problems.
So I'm on the opposite side of this science v. God issue with the good professor. I think he does a marvelous job of framing key issues, and this is one of those great framing quotations.
And he does not bring this up, I don't know why, but the new idea of the Big Bang Theory, it used to be that from nothing everything came and there was an explosion, and then, somehow these atoms created the elements and then the minerals. But today they've changed that. They now say that when we are saying that there was nothing, they're bringing up dark energy, dark matter, all kinds of different things. They're bringing up dimensions, how time did not exist yet, gravity didn't exist yet. And they claim that when they're talking about nothing, at the beginning there was nothing, that this nothingness was actually a whole bunch of stuff. So they went back from nothing to something exploding and expanding the universe, and then you get the elements and all this garbage. Okay, you have to believe in all kinds of miracles to believe in the Big Bang. Now they've changed that, and he doesn't bring it up here, but he brings it up in other videos. If you watch some of the stuff on the Big Bang Theory and how they're doing it now, it's completely different from how they claimed it even 10 years ago. They now say that it was full of dark energy, all these things that looks like nothing, but in quantum physics, if you had the ability to have a microscope, you could see all this stuff just floating around in the air. It's garbage. So there was always something, and somehow the something explodes, and it's garbage. So that defeats the whole purpose of the Big Bang, because the original Big Bang Theory is it tries to explain all the things that you have in your room right now came from nothingness. They've scrubbed that. They have scrubbed that now. If anybody tells you that they believe in evolution and then they bring up from nothing came everything, then they're not even following their own science, because their own science has abandoned that. They've completely abandoned that. They now say it was full of dark energy and all kinds of stuff.
Because what he's saying is that whether we think of it as a scientific question or a philosophical question or both, if we have a hypothesis about reality, the way we test that is by looking at the world around us and seeing if what we see comports with what we would expect to see if our hypothesis were true. And his hypothesis is that of blind, pitiless indifference, which is a shorthand way of saying that everything came about by strictly undirected material processes.
He's basically saying that chance, randomness, that there's no mercy, there's no creation, no creator.
And what the materialists expected coming into the early 20th century was evidence of an eternal, self-existent universe, one that had been here for an infinitely long time and therefore did not need an external creator. What in fact the astrophysicists, the cosmologists, the astronomers found was evidence of a universe that had a definite beginning. And therefore,
because all real science, not pseudoscience, leads to the creator, all of it. It says in the Torah, look upon nature and study and learn it and find the evidence. Find that there's a creator. See the creator in all the things. And a lot of these scientists hide things. They do it. The museums hide things.
One that could not have created itself because
you got to follow the money. When you got a problem and you got like a scam going on or you got a conspiracy to hide things, you follow the money. Who is it that funds them? All these evolutionists fund them. The moment that the museums come out with stuff and they say, oh yeah, we've had this locked away, that is the day that they stop getting funded.
Before the matter of the universe came into existence, there was no matter there to do the causing. And so the picture of the universe that has emerged starting from the 1920s all the way to the present, both from observational astronomy and from theoretical physics, is a universe that had a definite beginning and therefore requires some sort of external creator or cause.
All right, we got so many ads on here. I apologize.
Dawkins is obviously one of the world's most famous atheists. Are you a believer in God yourself?
I do believe in God, yes.
Okay, so let's play a clip from Dawkins on this show.
Yes.
So why is it not possible that there is a superior being, power, which many people believe in different ways?
It's possible there are
different
fairies
types
at the
of
bottom
God.
of the garden. I mean, all sorts of things are possible. you can't deny that.
Well, except I've never seen fairies at the end of the garden, have you?
No, you've never seen God either.
No, but you don't know for sure that either doesn't exist.
No, I don't know that fairies don't exist. Fairies may be leprechauns, for all I know.
You know, my big question for all atheists, is, okay, you don't believe in God, but what was there before the Big Bang, before this all started? In other words, what was there before supposedly nothing? What is nothing? Nothing to me seems to be a totally incongruous word. What is nothingness? And if you can't explain it, to me, and I believe in God, but to me, it suggests there must be a power bigger than the human mind at the start of all this that was able to comprehend what may have happened, because we can't.
Right. Dawkins wants to portray theistic belief as if it's equivalent to belief in fairies. And he'll concede that, well, it's possible. But I think there's a stronger argument for the theistic case. And that is that when scientists and philosophers reason from evidence, they typically use a method of reasoning that has a technical name. It's called inferring to the best explanation, where the best explanation is one where you're invoking a cause which has the kind of powers that would be required to explain the phenomenon.
So what he's talking about is like the Razor's theory. The most logical answer is the answer. Okay, so they do not want to ever admit that there's a creator. But the problem is that the evidence that they are looking at and the experiments that we can recreate do not in any way, shape, or form give any credit to evolution, the Big Bang Theory, or any of that. In fact, what we find is that you had to have some kind of super intelligence. And this is why a lot of these evolutionists are actually leaning now towards this crazy conspiracy that everything that we are experiencing is an illusion, and that there's some kind of supercomputer, an alien supercomputer that is creating a simulation. Look up simulation theory. If you think that I sound crazy, you should see some of the scientists that are pushing this, because they are now showing that there's all kinds of things to support simulation theory. And simulation theory literally says that there was a creator, but they don't want to call it God. They say that it's some kind of alien supercomputer and that we're all living in the Matrix, and that reality is not how it is. Well, guess what? You're catching up to Kabbalah. Kabbalah in the Jewish text literally tells you that everything is an illusion, but things matter. Things matter here. And that every one of the dimensions is a little bit more of an illusion. And the whole idea that there are multiple dimensions, the 10-string theory, is an illusion in itself. They're all one, but they're stretched out, and it's made to appear as an illusion. Science is slowly catching up to the Kabbalistic knowledge of how the universe was made and how it works. And that's what this comes down to.
And of interest. And you correctly pointed out in your conversation with him that when you get back to that, what physicists often call the singularity, the point where matter, space, time, and energy begin to exist, the materialist is really up against a huge conundrum, because prior to the origin of matter, there is no matter to do the causing. That's what we mean by the origin of matter, that's where it starts.
Right.
And so if you want to invoke a cause which is sufficient to explain the origin of matter, you can't invoke matter. It's in principle, the materialistic explanations are in principle insufficient. So you need to invoke something which is external to.
And so this is why I said that the new Big Bang Theory is now suggesting that there was never nothing, that it was, when they say nothing, it's actually dark energy and all this other garbage floating around in space. It would appear as nothing, but really it's a soup of elements. Well, where did the elements come from? They don't want to bring up that. So they have constructed what he's bringing up. You cannot have all this stuff with all these theories without starting with materials to work for or work from. Whether you believe in a creator or you believe in the Big Bang, you have to have materials. Okay, so they don't want to believe that God created the materials. So what they do is they say, well, there was nothing, but the nothing was really dark energy. Just, it looks like nothing, it appears to be nothing, but it's swirling around with dark energy and blah, 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 blah. And it's so stupid, it's garbage.
The material universe, and is not bounded by time and space as well. And that starts to paint a picture of the kind of cause you would need that has the sort of attributes the traditional theists have traditionally associated with God. God is a timeless, God is outside of time and space, has causal powers, is an agent with volition, and therefore can initiate a change of state from, in this case, nothing to something.
And do you believe that God created this original single cell from which everything flows to us?
Oh, the single cell as opposed to the universe.
Well, I guess you go back to the universe,
Yeah,
and then you go back to the creation of a single cell that has this incredible complexity that eventually, through the process of evolution, leads to human beings.
Yeah, I do think there's.
Do you believe that's really the most likely scenario?
Yeah, I do think there's incredible evidence of intelligent design at the point of the origin of life, because that first simple cell in the 19th century time.
Now he's not talking about the 6 days of creation, okay? He's talking about the idea that he believes that there is a God, but that God did use evolution. I know that's not true. I believe in the 6 days of creation. If you are a Noahide or a Jew, you should be following the 6 days of creation, because that is the truth. Remember, God says that he sends stumbling blocks. God literally tells you that he will test. So just because something may appear billions of years old does not mean that it's really not 5,600 years old. You see what I'm saying? It's stumbling blocks. But if you actually dig into the real science, then you have to be able to have experiments and evidence to prove your theories. Otherwise, it's always a theory. When you don't, it's a theory. It's not a law. Okay?
Thomas Huxley said that the cell is a simple homogeneous globule of undifferentiated protoplasm.
Brilliant phrase.
Wonderful. He was one of the great scientists of the 19th century, but we know so much more now that he didn't know. And what we now know is that inside even the simplest cell, we have digital nanotechnology. We have the information stored in the DNA. We have an exquisite system of information transfer.
So what he's talking about is what I was saying earlier, that when we find the simple single-celled organism, it is not simple at all. It's extremely complex. It's like a computer.
A storage, transmission, and processing, and that information is being used to build protein machines and other even more complex nanomachinery inside the cell. So it's a sort of automated factory run by digital information. People didn't know about that in the early 19th century.
But do you believe, like I said, originally there's just one?
So in layman's terms, he was saying in the 19th century, they thought that a simple single-celled organism was simple, and now we know they are not. They are very complex. So that was the layman terms.
Single solitary cell that's created.
Well, right. Presumably, that's where.
Is that what you think?
I do think there was an original cell that was created.
Because the theory of evolution says the journey from single cell to the full complexity of life on Earth and so on happened by random trial and error. But your position, I think, is that it's so complicated, this original single cell, so complex for all the reasons you just articulated, that that's just simply not feasible, that it would be just random trial and error. It had to.
So you cannot have elements and rocks that somehow birth the super complex single-celled organism. Do you understand that? We've never found a simple single-celled organism. They are always super complex. Whether you're talking about a single cell or a simplistic multi-celled creature that would still be, you could claim, oh, well, that's its great-great-grandfather or some crap like that. They're super complex. You can't have rocks that you say, oh, well, with gas and with light, and then there's lava, it cooks it, a primordial soup, blah, 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 and then somehow you got this complex computer factory cell thing running around. It doesn't happen, guys. It doesn't happen. It can't happen. When it happens, you literally, you would have to believe in the biggest miracle ever to believe in that. How do you get to that? How do you get from rocks and elements mixed with lava and gases and certain lights, certain proteins, amino acids, and then boom, you got a living cell running around and it's super complex. Like what?
To be the creation of some superior entity.
Right.
Is that right?
Well, again, there's two contexts. There's the how do you get to the first cell, and then how do you get from the first cell to everything else. Let's just take the origin of the first cell.
You think the creator of the universe is God?
I do.
And then out of the universe comes the creation of a single cell, which again is God.
Right. Here's the evidence, though, that when we see information in a digital or alphabetic or typographic form, and this is what we actually see in the DNA.
Talking about DNA.
When Francis Crick elucidated what he called the sequence hypothesis in the late 1950s, he realized that the 4 subunits along the interior of the DNA are functioning like alphabetic characters in a written text or digital characters in a section of software. What we know from experience is that whenever we say information of that sort, it always comes from a mind. Bill Gates, our local hero, has said that DNA is like a software program, but much more complex than any we've ever devised.
Yep.
Richard Dawkins has acknowledged that it functions like a machine code. Well, what we know is that software comes from a programmer. And in fact, whenever we see information of that kind, whether it's in a software program or a hieroglyphic inscription or a paragraph in a book, it always arises from a mind, not a material process. So the discovery of information at the foundation of life.
If people only understood how complex DNA and RNA is, they would never believe in evolution. You would never believe in it. And there has never been a creature that had some DNA that was just like a couple strands that was simple and like a short DNA. It's super complex, people. It's literally like he says, it's like a factory code.
Even the simplest living cell, I argue, is decisive.
One thing out of order and the being doesn't exist. It doesn't survive. It doesn't live. It's not that, oh, you add in another letter of the DNA and it mutates into a new animal. No, it dies. It doesn't exist. It won't lie. It won't be alive.
Evidence of the activity of a designing mind in the origin of life.
With Monday.com's intuitive
these ads. I'm sorry, guys.
work management platform, you have the power. Not IT, not ad.
What is the Goldilocks zone?
Oh, here we go.
Your big bedrock.
All right, now I've seen part of this. This is where he gets really scientific. He's going to explain how there are physics involved. He's not just talking about the heat. He's not just talking about a planet within a certain range of the sun. He's going to talk about all kinds of physics laws like gravity and other things that has to be precise. And that if it's off by a small degree, left or right, you can't have life. People that don't understand the Goldilocks zone, if you just If you just read some of the books on the Goldilocks zone, you would never believe in evolution ever.
Of your book.
Well, this is one way that the physicists refer to something that they call the fine-tuning of the universe, or sometimes they talk about it, the anthropic fine-tuning. The idea is that the most fundamental parameters of physics fall within very narrow ranges or tolerances, outside of which we have discovered life would not be possible. Even basic chemistry would not be possible. So the force responsible for the expansion of the universe, called the cosmological constant, is fine-tuned. An accepted value is to 1 part in 10 to the 90th power. So a smidge faster or slower in that expansion, and you either get a heat death of the universe or you get a big crunch, a great black.
And the chemistry won't even work. You won't even have chemical compounds that would, mix in a certain way and we'd see an effect here on Earth. They wouldn't even do it out somewhere else on another planet if the physics were different. We're talking about light, gravity, all kinds of different situations.
In either case, life is not possible. That's just one of many parameters that fall within that kind of a sweet spot.
Not even just life, the chemical.
The physicists do talk about are living in a Goldilocks universe. Luke Barnes has written a wonderful book about the fine-tuning. A physicist who also did his PhD at Cambridge has written a book called The Fortunate Universe. So these types of terms are now making their way into physics because physicists did not expect that life would depend upon such an exquisitely and improbably arranged set of basic parameters. But there we have it. They did. This is what they found.
But again, that comes back to the idea of a designer of all this.
Well, one of the scientists who first discovered these fine-tuning parameters was Fred Hoyle. And Hoyle was
Listen to this, because Fred Hoyle is a huge person to read about, to understand. If you follow him, you would never believe in evolution. Listen to what he says.
Pretty aggressive scientific atheist. He opposed the Big Bang and even gave the Big Bang its name, the Big Bang, as a kind of pejorative to
he was mocking
fun
it.
of the concept. But after he discovered some of these fine-tuning parameters, he had a shift in his philosophical perspective, in his worldview. And he was later quoted as saying that a common sense interpretation of the data, the fine-tuning data, suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics and chemistry to make life possible.
The guy that gave the name to the Big Bang theory didn't like it. The guy that named it later says that under the fine-tuning that we can see, and with the experiments and everything, the data from fine-tuning theory alone proves that there's a super intelligence involved. Hello, people. I'm telling you, I debate atheists all the time. I know my material. I study it. I study what actual evolutionists push. I study the counter stuff. There are science that disproves many things within evolution. Many things.
I would say I love the way the monkeys always make it into the origins discussion, even if it's in physics.
Always goes back to monkeys.
Always monkeys, either at a typewriter or something. Yeah.
Okay, so... let's back up here for a minute. Let's go back one. All right, so another really good one is this other one, why science is pointing back to a creator. Now, they spell it out here. It's 29 minutes long. This is a really good one. I would suggest looking at that one. So, yeah, I just wanted to make this short. True science points to God. Period. The people that are pushing evolution are not true scientists. They are bringing up hokey ideas. They're bringing up stuff that is literally theory, and they're speaking about theory as if it's law. This is a problem with atheists when I debate them, because I bring up science all the time, and then they get mad that I know more than them. They get mad that I'm bringing up scientific references. They get mad they can't counter it, and so what do? They all do it. Well, you believe in a creator, ha ha ha. You're religious, ha ha. They are the ones that bring up religion, not me. Every single time. When I debate an atheist, I never bring up religion. I'm bringing up science. I'm disproving many parts of evolution, and they can't handle it. Because the truth of the matter is, a large majority of these people who are claiming to be atheists or believe in evolution, they do not even know the things that evolutionists are putting out. They don't know it. I mean, you can find this in every religion. You can find Christians that do not know their own Bible. You can find Muslims that do not know the Quran. You can find Hindus that don't know whatever the Hindu book is. I don't know. You can find Buddhists that don't understand things about Buddhism. You can find this among all people. I don't know why, but it's a super high volume of atheists that never know even the most basics. They don't know even the most basics. So all science does point back to God. All of it. It points back to a creator. Like, share, and subscribe, guys. I'm trying to build my account back up. I took down so many of my videos ages ago, and then I restarted up a while back. But yeah, like, share, and subscribe. Please support me. I need your help, and I appreciate it. Comment below, and like I said, if a person is arguing with theory and they don't want to admit that it's theory, and you can prove that it's still a theory, then you've already defeated them. If they're going to debate about a theory and they're an evolutionist or whatever, they have to admit it's a theory, okay? And they can argue about theory. They can bring up theories. I'm not saying they can't, but when they try to claim that theory is a physics law, then there's a problem. There's a problem. So if it takes a while to learn the sciences, it takes a while to learn everything. There's just so much about evolution that disproves evolution. It's not even fun. You don't need religion. If you're a religious person and you're watching this, don't bring up religion to an atheist. Like, why do you do that? Don't. Use the science to disprove it. Use the science. Don't use your Bible. That's the dumbest reasoning ever. When you're debating someone, you have to use things that they support. If I'm debating a Muslim, the Muslim cannot use the Quran against me to try to demand, hey, you need to be a Muslim. I don't believe in the Quran, so don't use it like that. If we're arguing about what the Quran says and doesn't say, that's a different story. But if I'm arguing with a Muslim, I can't turn around and use references that he doesn't support or she doesn't support. You have to use things that they support. And these atheists claim that science is on their side when it is not. So use the science against them. Like, share, and subscribe, guys. Take care.